Phil Dampier is a royal author and journalist who's been writing about the British royal family for 36 years. I'm delighted to say welcome, Phil, to Bernardi. How would you reflect on the Queen's life and reign after you've studied her so closely over those years?
Yeah, I started in 1986 with Andy and Fergie's wedding, and I've been following the royals around ever since, for my sins. I mean, I was born, 5 years after she came to the throne, and so obviously I've seen it. She's the only queen I've known, and so obviously I've seen it all the way through. I followed her on tours all around the world. I saw her in Australia in 2002 on the Golden Jubilee tour when Prince Philip made that gaffe with the Aborigines, and we met the Queen and Prince Philip the next day at a hotel in Brisbane, and they came over and talked to us. So I've got some very fond memories of following her around the world. And as you said earlier, I think she was really the queen of the world. Even Vladimir Putin has praised her in a comment overnight. And countries all over the world, nothing to do with the Commonwealth, nothing to do with the UK, feeling a great sense of loss. And I think, as you say, that was because she represented something from the past, from a different era, a sense of duty, which we don't have a lot of these days. And she's just going to be terribly missed. She's going to be an incredibly difficult act to follow for King Charles, as we must now call him, but he's obviously not going to have a reign anything like the length of his mother, but I think there'll be a lot of goodwill towards him. And of course, Prince William and Catherine coming behind, and Camilla supporting Charles. He's coming back to London today. He's going to address the nation, and he just has to get stuck straight into it. And even before the Queen's funeral, he's travelling around all four corners of the United Kingdom, going to Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England, proclaiming himself as king and introducing himself to the public. So it starts in earnest right away.
And there will be a lot of goodwill extended to him. Now, Phil, I've got to say, you mentioned the gaffe of Prince Philip. What people call gaffes, I called endearing anecdotes because I thought he was an incredible man himself. But Her Majesty was an extraordinary figure. What is the best story about her life that you have?
Well, it was always great to meet them. I mean, on that particular occasion, Prince Philip came over and wandered over and saw us hacks standing there, and he just sort of said, "Oh, the trouble with you lot is you've got no sense of humour, complete absence of humour." He didn't really mind that this had made headlines all over the world. And then the Queen came over, and of course, when people meet the Queen, they're always incredibly nervous. And they talk to her about the most banal things. And I remember a photographer started telling her about the lunch she'd had to endure on a short internal flight. And she said, "Oh, that's terrible for you." And then she was eating a canapé, actually, and she dropped it on the floor. And to my astonishment, she picked it up and she didn't eat it, obviously. She then put it on a plate. And I just wasn't expecting the Queen to sort of bend down and pick something up off the carpet like anyone else. So, behind the scenes, she was very, very human. She had a fantastic sense of humour. We saw a lot more of that in recent years, I think after her mother died in 2002, during that Golden Jubilee year. And I think she loosened up a bit. She dressed differently under the influence of her dresser, Angela Kelly. And she really her humour came out a lot more, and she smiled a lot more in public. And I think that was great to see.
Yeah, that was one of the things that struck me about my experience with her from when I was born in the late 60s, is that she did evolve with the times, and she seemed to become more accepting of the need for modernity coupled with tradition as time went on. Is that something that you saw as well?
She was a very, very pragmatic person. She would change where change was. She didn't like change for change's sake, but if change was necessary, she would do it. And you could see that with the reaction to Diana's death, when eventually she came down from Scotland and gave that speech, and that really the monarchy really was in trouble in the 1990s, and particularly after Diana died. And earlier on, she dismissed Camilla Parker Bowles as when Charles's mistress, as that wicked woman. But later on, I think she realised that Charles was never going to give her up. He wasn't going to be happy without her. And so she changed, and she welcomed Camilla into the family. 2005, they got married, and I think she thinks that obviously for Charles to be a successful king, he's got to be a happy king, and Camilla makes him happy. So she accepted her, and in the end, I think they got on extremely well, and she came to admire her.
That's wonderful. Now, Phil, I've been hearing a lot about this London Bridge process and what actually happens now, and particularly in regards to succession. Can you talk us quickly through that process?
Yeah, it's now called Operation Unicorn. Charles is coming back to London today. He's going to address the nation. There's going to be tributes in the Commons. Then, as I say, he goes round on this whistle-stop tour around the country. Meanwhile, the Queen's body will be taken to Holyrood House in Edinburgh. That was her official home there. And her body will eventually be brought back on the royal train, and where she'll go to Buckingham Palace for a couple of days, where family members will be able to pay their tributes. That will be private. Then her body will be taken to Westminster Hall, where for 23 hours a day, for 3 days, people will be able to file past her coffin. So I expect that to just be continuous. It was a little bit like Winston Churchill when he died and lay in state. And one journalist famously wrote there were 2 rivers flowing through London. One was the Thames and one was the River of People. And I'm sure that will be the same with the Queen. And then, of course, all the dignitaries and heads of state start to arrive. And we're expecting the funeral to be at Westminster Abbey on Monday week. Possible it might be changed, but at the moment, that's the plan. And I've never thought Westminster Abbey is a brilliant venue. You can't see very well for lots of people. Lots of quite high up VIPs will be near the back and not be able to see very much. But you and I will all be able to see it on television. Billions of people around the world, I'm sure, will be watching. Probably one of the biggest global audiences ever. And it's just going to be an extraordinary event to attribute to an extraordinary woman.
That sums it up beautifully. An extraordinary event as a tribute to an extraordinary woman. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate your insights.